My name is Zixtar, and I am a warrior of the Kalani Republic. For 3 centuries, I have served as a battle surgeon aboard various warships, tending to wounded soldiers across dozens of conflicts. I have seen plasma burns that melted through bone, watched brave souls die from toxin exposure, and witnessed the aftermath of gravitational weapons that turned living beings into twisted sculptures of pain. I thought I had seen every horror the galaxy could offer. I was wrong. Everything changed when the humans joined our war against the Devourers. I had heard whispers about this young species that had somehow survived first contact with the galaxy's most feared enemy. The stories seemed impossible. Humans were supposed to be weak creatures from a backwater world, barely capable of space travel. Their military technology was primitive compared to ours. Their ships were ugly metal boxes held together with what they called duct tape and stubborn determination. Yet somehow, they had not only survived a Devourer assault, but had actually pushed them back. When the Galactic Council announced that humanity would join our coalition fleet, most of us laughed. The Kalani have fought the Devourers longer than any other species. We knew what these monsters could do. They didn't just kill you. They consumed your very essence, leaving behind empty husks that served their hive mind. Our best warriors barely held the line against them, and here came these soft-skinned mammals, thinking they could help. The human ship that docked with our flagship looked like a flying scrapyard. The hull was covered in welded patches, weapon mounts that seemed randomly placed, and warning symbols in their primitive language. When their representative came aboard for the strategy meeting, I couldn't believe my eyes. Captain Sarah Chen was small, even by human standards, with graying hair and scars across her hands. She wore a simple uniform with no ceremonial decorations, carried no visible weapons, and spoke in a quiet voice that barely carried across our war room. Admiral Korthvin, our fleet commander, explained the situation with barely concealed impatience. The Devourers have established a breeding facility on Kepler 442b. Intelligence suggests they're creating a new strain of warrior form specifically designed to counter our plasma weaponry. We have 48 hours before their numbers become overwhelming. Our plan is a direct assault with maximum firepower, hoping to destroy the facility before these new creatures can be deployed. Captain Chen studied the tactical display for a long moment, then shook her head. That won't work. You'll lose half your fleet before you even breach their outer defenses. The facility is too well protected for a frontal assault. Several officers bristled at her words. Admiral Korthvin's jaw plates flared in annoyance. Human, your species has fought exactly 1 engagement against the Devourers. We have been at war with them for over 200 years. Perhaps you should listen rather than lecture. Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but I noticed her hands clench slightly. With respect, Admiral, you've been fighting them the same way for 200 years, and they're still here. Maybe it's time to try something different. And what do you suggest? The Admiral asked coldly. We go in quiet, small teams. Hit their breeding chambers from the inside while they're focused on your fleet. My people have some experience with this kind of operation. The room erupted in protests. The idea of sending small teams into a Devourer facility was suicide. These creatures had senses beyond our understanding, could detect living beings from kilometers away, and their hive mind meant that alerting one alerted them all. It was madness. But Admiral Korthvin was desperate. Our last 3 major offensives had failed catastrophically, and High Command was pressuring him for results. After an hour of heated debate, he agreed to a modified plan. The main fleet would begin their assault as scheduled, drawing Devourer attention. Meanwhile, a small strike force, including human soldiers, would attempt to infiltrate the facility. I volunteered to accompany the mission as medical support. As a battle surgeon, I had seen enough warriors die from Devourer encounters to know what to expect. I packed my emergency medical supplies, loaded my plasma rifle, and tried to prepare myself mentally for what would likely be my final battle. The strike team consisted of 12 beings, 4 Kalani warriors, 3 Vorthan commandos, 2 Zephyrian scouts, 2 humans, and myself. The humans introduced themselves simply as Marcus and Elena. Marcus was a large man with kind eyes and hands that seemed too gentle for a soldier. Elena was smaller, with short dark hair and an intensity that reminded me of a coiled spring. Both carried weapons I didn't recognize, projectile weapons that seemed laughably primitive compared to our energy-based armaments. "Bullets?" I asked Marcus during the approach flight. "You're planning to fight devourers with metal projectiles?" He smiled and patted his rifle affectionately. "These aren't ordinary bullets. Depleted uranium cores, explosive tips, and a little human engineering. Sometimes the old ways work best." Our insertion craft was a hybrid design, combining Kalani stealth technology with human modifications that made no sense to me. The hull was covered in what Elena called ablative armor, layers of different materials designed to shed and break away under fire. It looked like the ship was already falling apart before we'd even left dock. The approach to Kepler 442b was tense. The planet's surface was covered in the characteristic black growths of devourer bioarchitecture. Massive towers stretched into the atmosphere, connected by web-like structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. At the center of the largest growth sat our target, a breeding facility the size of a city, its organic walls writhing with constant motion. As we descended through the planet's atmosphere, our sensors began detecting the enemy. Thousands of devourer forms moved across the surface like antibodies in a bloodstream. Flying variants patrolled the skies in complex patterns, their wings beating with mechanical precision. Ground-based warriors stood motionless until needed, then moved with terrifying speed and coordination. "How exactly do you plan to get us past all that?" asked Veltar, our team's ranking Kalani officer. Elena was studying her scanner readings with an expression I would later learn to recognize as anticipation. "We don't go past them, we go through them." Before anyone could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout our craft. A swarm of flying devourers had detected us and were closing fast. Through the viewport, I could see dozens of creatures the size of small fighters, their organic wings beating in perfect synchronization as they approached with obvious hostile intent. "Brace for evasive maneuvers," called our pilot. "Negative," Elena said calmly. "Hold course and speed. Marcus, you ready?" "Always." What happened next defied everything I thought I knew about warfare. Instead of trying to outrun or outfight the pursuing swarm, Marcus opened the craft's rear cargo bay and positioned himself at the opening. As the first wave of devourers closed to attack range, he began firing his primitive projectile weapon. The results were devastating. Each bullet found its target with impossible accuracy, and the explosive rounds tore through devourer bioarmor like it was paper. Creatures that had shrugged off plasma blasts from our best weapons fell apart in sprays of ichor and shattered chitin. In 30 seconds, Marcus had destroyed more enemies than our last squadron engagement. But it was Elena's reaction that truly unsettled me. While the rest of us watched in amazement, she was smiling. Not the grim satisfaction of a warrior completing a necessary task, but genuine pleasure. She was enjoying this. "Nice shooting," she called to Marcus over the howling wind. "Think you got them all?" "Most of them. There's a few stragglers behind that rock formation. I'll take care of them." Elena activated some kind of targeting system on her weapon and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. Each bullet curved through the air in impossible trajectories, bending around obstacles to strike hidden targets. The remaining devourers fell burning from the sky. "How did you do that?" demanded Veltar. "Those were guided projectiles, but I saw no targeting lasers, no sensor locks." Elena shrugged. "Practice and a little bit of what we call Kentucky windage. Our pilot was scanning frantically. More contacts approaching from the east, big ones, warrior-class bioforms. I looked at the scanner display and felt my heart sink. 12 massive signatures were moving toward us at incredible speed. Devourer warriors were the size of assault mechs, protected by armor that could withstand sustained bombardment and armed with natural weapons that could tear through starship hulls. "Can we outrun them?" asked one of the Vorthon commandos. "Not a chance," our pilot replied. "They're too fast, and we're too close to the surface for orbital maneuvers." Elena checked her weapon and looked at Marcus. Some kind of silent communication passed between them, the sort of understanding that only came from fighting together many times before. "How many rounds do you have left?" she asked. "Plenty," Marcus replied. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Probably. Veltar, tell your pilot to set us down about 2 kilometers from that ridgeline. We're going to fight them on the ground." "That's suicide," Veltar protested. 12 Devourer warriors against 11 of us? And most of us are support personnel, not frontline fighters." Elena's smile returned, and for the first time I understood why it made me so uncomfortable. It wasn't the expression of someone who was confident or prepared. It was the smile of someone who was looking forward to what came next. "Trust me," she said. "Humans are really good at this kind of thing." Our craft touched down on a rocky plateau overlooking a deep valley. The Devourer warriors were approaching fast, their massive forms visible even at a distance as they bounded across the landscape with surprising speed for their size. Each one was unique, evolved for specific combat roles, some armed with projectile weapons grown from their own bodies, others equipped with massive claws or acid-spitting organs. The humans took position behind a cluster of boulders and began unpacking equipment I hadn't seen them carry aboard. From seemingly nowhere, they produced additional weapons, ammunition, and devices I couldn't identify. Marcus assembled what looked like a larger version of his rifle, while Elena set up several small cylinders around their position. "Those are mines," Elena explained when she noticed my stare. "They'll help channel the enemy movement. Marcus is setting up overwatch with his sniper rifle. The rest of you should spread out and try not to bunch up. When this starts, it's going to get chaotic fast." The first Devourer warrior appeared at the top of the valley wall. Up close, it was even more terrifying than I had imagined. Standing 4 meters tall, its bio-armor gleamed with a metallic sheen that spoke of incredible durability. 6 limbs ended in claws that could crush vehicle armor, and its head was dominated by sensory organs that tracked multiple targets simultaneously. When it spotted us, it let out a sound that was part roar, part electronic screech. The sound was answered by 11 others as the remaining warriors appeared and began their charge. Marcus fired first. His bullet struck the lead warrior center mass and detonated with tremendous force. The creature staggered but didn't fall, its armor absorbing most of the impact. It resumed its charge, now trailing ichor from a crater in its chest. "Tough bastards," Marcus muttered, and fired again. This shot took off one of the creature's arms, spinning it around and slowing its advance. Elena's mines began detonating as the other warriors entered their kill zone. The explosions channeled the enemy movement exactly as she had predicted, forcing them into a narrow approach that allowed Marcus to engage them one at a time. But even wounded, the Devourers kept coming. The first warrior reached our position despite Marcus's fire and Elena's mines. Veltar and the other Kalani warriors opened fire with their plasma rifles, scoring hits but failing to bring the creature down. It backhanded Veltar across the plateau with casual force, sending him flying into a rock wall where he crumpled and didn't get up. That was when I saw what Elena meant about humans being good at this kind of thing. She didn't retreat or take cover. Instead, she ran directly at the wounded warrior, firing her weapon as she moved. Her bullets struck with surgical precision, joints, sensor organs, the gaps between armor plates. When she ran out of ammunition, she discarded the gun and drew a knife. A knife. Against a 4-meter-tall bioweapon designed for maximum lethality. The warrior swung one massive claw at her. Elena ducked under the blow and drove her blade into the creature's leg joint. Dark fluid sprayed as she severed some critical tendon or nerve cluster. The warrior toppled sideways, and Elena was already moving, climbing up its back to reach the head. I watched in horrified fascination as this small human woman systematically dismantled a creature that could have destroyed our entire team. She knew exactly where to cut, how to disable its weapons, what parts were vulnerable. When she was finished, the warrior was still alive but completely helpless. Its limbs twitching uselessly as Elena stood atop its back like some primitive hunter displaying her kill. The other warriors had seen their companion fall and were approaching more cautiously now. Elena wiped her blade clean and looked at the remaining 11 enemies with that same unsettling smile. "Marcus, how are we doing on ammunition?" "Still good. These things are tougher than the intel suggested, but nothing we can't handle." "Outstanding. Zixtar, you might want to start getting those medical supplies ready. When this is over, we're going to have wounded to tend to." I realized she was talking about our enemies, not our team. She was planning to leave some of them alive. The battle that followed redefined my understanding of warfare. What the humans did to those devourer warriors wasn't just fighting, it was artistry. Horrible, beautiful, terrifying artistry. Marcus continued his precise shooting from his elevated position, each bullet finding exactly the right spot to disable rather than destroy. Meanwhile, Elena moved through the enemy like a force of nature. She didn't fight the way we had been trained to fight devourers, with overwhelming firepower and protective distance. Instead, she got close, impossibly close, using their own size and strength against them. I watched her slide between the legs of a charging warrior, her knife opening arteries with surgical precision. The creature collapsed, not dead, but immobilized by blood loss. Another warrior tried to grab her with its massive claws, but she used its grip as an anchor point, swinging around to land on its back, where she severed the neural connections that controlled its limbs. The Vorthon commandos and remaining Kalani warriors tried to help, but their plasma fire was almost unnecessary. The humans had turned 11 of the galaxy's most feared predators into a training exercise. Within 20 minutes, all 12 warriors lay helpless on the plateau, alive but completely neutralized. Elena knelt beside the first warrior they had disabled and began examining its wounds with clinical interest. "Zixtar, come here. I want to show you something." I approached reluctantly, my medical scanner detecting the creature's vital signs. Despite its injuries, it was stable. The cuts Elena had made were precise, avoiding major organs while severing only what was necessary to prevent movement. "Look at this," Elena said, pointing to where her knife had entered the joint. "These bioforms are incredibly sophisticated, but they still follow basic anatomical principles. If you know where to cut, you can disable them without causing unnecessary damage." "Why?" I asked. "Why keep them alive? Devourers don't take prisoners. They don't show mercy." Elena's expression grew serious. "Because we're not them, and because these warriors might have information we need." Marcus climbed down from his sniper position, carrying several devices I didn't recognize. "How do you want to handle interrogation? Standard neural interface, or do you want to try the new pheromone synthesizer?" "Let's start with pheromones. Less invasive, and we need them functional for the main mission." I watched in amazement as the humans began setting up equipment that could interface directly with devourer biology. In 200 years of warfare, we had never successfully interrogated a captured devourer. Their hive mind made conventional techniques useless, and their alien psychology was completely incomprehensible to us. But somehow, these humans had developed methods that worked. The pheromone synthesizer was a device about the size of my medical scanner that could analyze and replicate chemical signals. Elena attached it to the nearest disabled warrior and began cycling through different combinations. After several minutes, the creature's posture changed subtly. Its head tilted, sensory organs focused on the device, and its body language shifted from aggressive tension to something resembling attention. "Got it," Elena said. "Marcus, start recording. Zixtar, you might want to take notes. What we're about to learn could change how your people fight this war." What followed was the first successful communication between our coalition forces and a living devourer. The chemical language was incredibly complex, involving dozens of different compounds released in precise sequences. But the human's equipment was able to translate the meaning into something we could understand. The information we extracted was horrifying. The breeding facility we were targeting wasn't just creating new warrior strains. It was developing something the devourers called harvesters, bioforms specifically designed to process entire planetary populations into raw material for their expansion. According to the captured warrior, these creatures could consume millions of beings in a matter of days, converting organic matter into new devourer forms with unprecedented efficiency. Even worse, the facility was much larger than our intelligence had suggested. What we thought was a single breeding complex was actually just the surface structure of a massive underground network that extended deep into the planet's crust. The main production areas were kilometers below ground, protected by layers of bioarmor and defended by thousands of specialized guardian forms. "How long until the first harvester batch is complete?" Elena asked through the pheromone interface. The warrior's response made my blood freeze. 18 hours. We had 18 hours before the first wave of planet killers would be ready for deployment. Marcus was studying the facility schematics the creature had provided. "This changes everything. Admiral Korthvin's fleet assault won't even scratch the main production areas. We need to go deeper." Elena nodded grimly. "Agreed. But first, we need to get inside the surface structure and plant some surprises for their defenses. Zixtar, how are the other team members?" I checked on Veltar and the others while the humans continued their interrogation. Veltar had suffered serious injuries from the warrior's attack. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a concussion that left him barely conscious. The Vorthon commandos were shaken but functional, and our 2 Zephyrian scouts had somehow avoided injury entirely by staying mobile during the fight. "Veltar needs immediate medical attention," I reported. "I can stabilize him, but he won't be able to continue the mission." "What about the others?" "They're scared. What you did to those warriors, it's not natural. No species should be able to fight like that." Elena looked genuinely puzzled by my comment. "What do you mean? We just used basic tactics adapted to the enemy's capabilities." "Basic tactics? You dismantled 12 devourer warriors with knives and bullets. You made it look easy." "It wasn't easy," Marcus said. "It was necessary. When something is trying to kill you, you use whatever advantages you have. Speed, agility, knowledge of anatomy, psychological warfare. Humans have been fighting predators for millions of years. We got good at it." I realized then that the humans' casual attitude toward extreme violence wasn't sociopathic indifference. It was the result of evolutionary pressure that had shaped their entire species. They came from a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they had not only survived, but thrived by becoming the most efficient killers their planet had ever produced. We spent the next hour planning our infiltration of the surface facility. The captured devourer warriors provided detailed information about internal defenses, patrol patterns, and the location of critical systems. Elena and Marcus used this intelligence to develop a plan that was simultaneously elegant and terrifying. Instead of trying to fight their way through the facility's defenses, they would use the devourer's own hive mind against them. By careful placement of what they called neural disruptors, devices that could broadcast contradictory signals into the collective consciousness, they could create confusion and coordination failures throughout the entire structure. Think of it as giving the hive mind a severe headache, Elena explained. Individual devourers will still be dangerous, but they'll lose the tactical coordination that makes them so effective in large numbers. The plan required splitting into smaller teams. Marcus would take our 2 scouts and infiltrate the facility's eastern section to plant the primary disruptor. Elena would lead the Vorthan commandos through the western approach to sabotage their power systems. I would remain with the disabled warriors and Veltar, monitoring communications and providing medical support as needed. As the teams prepared to move out, I found myself alone with Elena for a moment. "Why are you really here?" I asked. "Your people barely know us. This war started before your species even achieved interstellar flight. You could have stayed on Earth, built up your defenses, waited to see how things turned out. Instead, you came to help strangers fight an enemy that could destroy your entire civilization." Elena checked her equipment one final time before answering. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because if we don't stop the devourers here, they'll eventually reach Earth anyway. Better to fight them where we choose than wait for them to bring the war to our doorstep. Your species has such a short history of space travel. How did you develop all this technology so quickly? These neural disruptors, the pheromone synthesizers, the specialized ammunition. This represents decades of research." She smiled that unsettling smile again. "We had help. About 50 years ago, a damaged Devourer scout ship crashed in our solar system. We managed to recover most of it intact, including several living specimens. Our scientists have been studying them ever since." 50 years? But first contact protocols require any discovery of alien life to be reported to the Galactic Council immediately. We've never been very good at following other people's rules. Besides, we figured it was better to be prepared than to follow protocol. I felt a chill as I realized the implications. Humanity had been preparing for this war for half a century, conducting research on live devourer specimens without any oversight or guidance from the galactic community. They had violated dozens of interspecies treaties and protocols, all in service of developing weapons and tactics specifically designed to kill these creatures. "The other species in the coalition," I said slowly, "do they know?" "They know we've been effective against the Devourers. They don't know how or why. And right now, with harvesters about to be deployed, I don't think they care about the details." Elena activated her communicator and signaled the teams to begin their infiltration. I watched through our craft's sensors as they approached the facility's outer defenses. The structure was even more alien up close. Organic walls that pulse with bioluminescent patterns, defensive turrets that looked like oversized arthropod limbs, and patrol routes that formed complex geometric patterns across the surface. Marcus and the scouts reached their insertion point first. Using some kind of chemical camouflage, they became nearly invisible to Devourer sensors, moving through patrol routes with perfect timing. I watched their progress through thermal imaging as they descended into the facility's interior through what appeared to be a ventilation system. Elena's team took a more direct approach. Instead of avoiding the defenses, they systematically dismantled them. The Vorthan commandos provided covering fire while Elena moved from position to position, disabling defensive systems with surgical precision. She seemed to know exactly where each structure was vulnerable, exactly how much force was needed to destroy it without triggering backup systems. "How does she know so much about their architecture?" asked one of the Vorthans over the communication channel. "Experience," was Elena's only response. As the teams penetrated deeper into the facility, my sensors began detecting massive energy signatures from the underground levels. The breeding chambers were active, working at full capacity to complete their horrifying production quota. Through the facility's own monitoring systems, which the humans had somehow gained access to, I could see images of the harvester production process. The creatures being created down there were nothing like the warriors we had fought. Where warriors were designed for individual combat, harvesters were optimized for mass consumption. They possessed digestive systems that could process any organic matter, reproductive capabilities that allowed them to spawn additional units from consumed material, and sensory systems that could track every living being across an entire planet. Worse, they were being created in huge numbers. Thousands of them filled the underground chambers in various stages of development. Some were nearly complete, already showing signs of consciousness as their neural systems came online. "Target acquired," Marcus reported. "I'm in position to deploy the primary neural disruptor, but there's a problem. The hive mind density down here is much higher than we expected. The disruptor might not be powerful enough to affect the entire facility." Elena's voice crackled over the communicator. "How much more power do you need?" "At least 3 times what we have. Unless what? Unless we overload it. Feed it power from the facility's own systems. It would create a neural feedback loop that could disrupt the hive mind across the entire planet." "What's the downside?" "The overload would destroy the disruptor and everything within a 2-kilometer radius, including anyone who happened to be inside the facility at the time." There was a long pause before Elena responded. "Do it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was ordering Marcus to destroy himself along with the facility. Even if the plan worked, both human team leaders would be killed in the explosion. "Elena, negative," I transmitted. "There has to be another way. Your people can't sacrifice themselves like this." "Zixtar, you need to understand something about humans. When we commit to protecting something, we don't hold back. We don't calculate acceptable losses or measure cost-benefit ratios. We do whatever it takes. But your species has so few ships, so few people. Every loss matters. Every life matters. That's exactly why we're doing this. The harvesters will be ready in 16 hours. If we don't stop them now, billions of beings across dozens of worlds will die. 2 human lives against billions of alien lives? That's not even a difficult calculation." Marcus was already beginning the overload sequence when Elena made her final transmission. "One more thing, Zixtar. When you report back to the Admiral, tell him that humanity is formally requesting membership in the Galactic Coalition. We want to be full partners in this war, but the membership requirements, the probationary periods, the cultural compatibility assessments, I don't think the Devourers care about our paperwork." The neural disruptor overload began 15 minutes later. I felt it first as a pressure in my skull, then as a disorienting sense of vertigo that made it difficult to focus. Around me, the captured Devourer warriors began convulsing as the feedback loop tore through their shared consciousness. The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire valley. A column of energy rose into the atmosphere, carrying with it the organic matter that had once been the Devourer breeding facility. The underground chambers collapsed in sequence, crushing thousands of nearly complete harvesters before they could be deployed. When the light faded and the dust settled, the facility was gone. In its place was a crater that stretched down to the planet's bedrock, still glowing with residual energy from the neural disruptor. Admiral Korthvin's fleet arrived 6 hours later to find the mission complete and the Devourer threat eliminated. The humans had done in one day what our combined forces had failed to accomplish in 2 centuries of warfare. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Marcus, Elena, and the entire infiltration teams were gone, vaporized in the explosion that had saved countless lives. I was the only survivor who had witnessed their sacrifice, the only one who could tell their story. When I submitted my mission report, I included Elena's final request about coalition membership. I also included my personal recommendation that humanity be granted not just membership, but full military partnership status. Any species capable of such tactical brilliance and such selfless sacrifice deserved our respect and our trust. 3 months have passed since the destruction of the Harvester breeding facility. In that time, everything has changed. The war that had dragged on for 2 centuries suddenly shifted in our favor, and it was all because of what the humans taught us. Admiral Korthvin initially refused to believe my mission report. The idea that 2 humans had single-handedly destroyed a facility that would have required our entire fleet to assault seemed impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. Orbital scans confirmed the complete destruction of the underground complex. Captured Devourer communications showed panic and confusion throughout their remaining forces. Most importantly, no harvesters had been deployed anywhere in the galaxy. The Galactic Council's response was swift and unprecedented. Humanity was granted full coalition membership without the usual probationary period. More significantly, they were appointed as tactical advisors for all future anti-Devourer operations. What followed was a complete revolution in how we fought this war. The first change was in our understanding of Devourer biology. Using data recovered from the human analysis of their 50-year-old specimens, coalition scientists developed new weapons specifically designed to exploit biological vulnerabilities we had never known existed. Our plasma rifles were modified to fire at frequencies that disrupted Devourer nervous systems. Our ship-to-ship weaponry was redesigned to target the bioelectrical fields that connected their hive mind nodes. But the most important change was tactical. Human military doctrine was unlike anything we had ever encountered. Where we focused on overwhelming firepower and defensive formations, humans emphasized mobility, psychological warfare, and what they called asymmetric engagement. They taught us to think like predators rather than prey. I found myself assigned to a new mixed species unit under human command. Our mission was to hunt down remaining Devourer breeding facilities using the tactics Elena and Marcus had demonstrated. It was during these operations that I truly began to understand what made humans so effective and so terrifying. Captain David Morrison was our unit commander, a veteran of humanity's secret 50-year preparation period. Unlike Elena's quiet intensity or Marcus's gentle demeanor, Morrison was openly aggressive, with a smile that promised violence and eyes that seemed to catalog everything as either a potential weapon or a potential target. Our first joint operation was against a smaller facility on the asteroid colony of Vega Prime. Intelligence suggested the Devourers were experimenting with new forms of bioarmor, using captured coalition prisoners as test subjects. The facility was heavily defended and located in a civilian population center, making orbital bombardment impossible. Morrison's solution was characteristically human. "We don't attack the facility," he announced during our mission briefing. "We attack their supply lines, their communication networks, their confidence. We make them come to us on our terms." He deployed our mixed team in a pattern that seemed random to me, but apparently made perfect sense to human tactical doctrine. Small groups were positioned throughout the asteroid, each armed with human-designed harassment weapons. Devices that could disrupt Devourer communications, interfere with their sensory organs, and generally make their lives miserable without causing significant damage. For 3 days, we conducted what Morrison called a terror campaign. Every time a Devourer patrol left the facility, they encountered some kind of interference. Their communications were jammed. Their bioelectrical systems were disrupted by EMP-like devices. Their food supplies were contaminated with chemicals that made them nauseating but not lethal. The psychological effect was devastating. The Devourers, accustomed to operating as a unified collective, found themselves isolated and confused. Individual units began making mistakes, tactical coordination broke down, and the facility's defenders became increasingly paranoid and aggressive. On the 4th day, they broke. A full assault force of 60 Devourer warriors emerged from the facility. abandoning their defensive positions to hunt down what they perceived as a major threat. Morrison had positioned our teams so that the enemy advance would lead them directly into a carefully prepared kill zone. What followed was a massacre, but not in the way I expected. Instead of destroying the Devourer force, Morrison captured them. All 60 warriors were disabled using the same techniques Elena had demonstrated, leaving them alive but helpless. The facility, now defended by only a skeleton crew, fell to our assault within hours. But it was what Morrison did with the prisoners that truly shocked me. Using human pheromone synthesis technology, he began a systematic interrogation that extracted not just tactical information, but detailed intelligence about Devourer psychology, social structure, and long-term strategic planning. We learned that the Devourers weren't just expanding randomly, they were following a carefully planned campaign designed to encircle the galactic core and cut off coalition supply lines. More disturbing was what we learned about their perception of different species. The Devourers had detailed psychological profiles of every coalition member race, including information about our fears, motivations, and tactical weaknesses. They knew exactly how to manipulate each species, how to break our morale, how to turn us against each other. But their files on humanity were almost empty. After 50 years of study, they still didn't understand what drove human behavior. Their analysts were completely baffled by human willingness to sacrifice individual lives for abstract concepts like honor or duty. They couldn't comprehend a species that would choose certain death over certain defeat. They think like a hive mind, Morrison explained as we reviewed the interrogation results. Everything they do is calculated to benefit the collective. The idea of individual choice, individual sacrifice, individual heroism, it's completely alien to them. That's our advantage. Over the following months, we conducted 17 more raids using Morrison's tactics. Each operation was perfectly successful, with minimal coalition casualties and maximum intelligence gain. We captured breeding facilities, supply depots, and communication hubs across 3 star systems. The Devourers went from aggressive expansion to desperate defense in a matter of weeks. But success came with a price that I was only beginning to understand. During our raid on the Centaurus Prime facility, I watched Morrison interrogate a captured Devourer queen form, a massive creature whose consciousness served as a coordination node for thousands of lesser beings. The interrogation lasted for 18 hours, during which Morrison systematically dismantled the creature's psychological defenses using a combination of pheromone manipulation, sensory deprivation, and what he called cognitive restructuring. When it was over, the queen form had provided complete intelligence about Devourer strategic planning for the next decade. But the creature itself was fundamentally changed. Its connection to the hive mind was severed, leaving it isolated in a way that no Devourer had ever experienced. The psychological trauma was so severe that the creature began exhibiting behaviors that could only be described as individual personality traits. "You've turned it into something that's not a Devourer anymore," I said to Morrison as we watched the creature's erratic movements in its containment cell. "That's the point," he replied. "We're not just fighting their bodies or their technology. We're fighting their entire conceptual framework. Every Devourer we capture and convert is a weapon we can use against the hive mind." I realized then that Morrison wasn't just conducting military operations. He was engaged in a form of warfare that operated on levels I had never imagined. He was destroying the Devourers not just physically, but philosophically, turning their own nature against them. The final operation of our campaign was against the Devourer command center in the Kepler system. Intelligence suggested this facility contained the primary consciousness that coordinated all Devourer activities in our galactic sector. Destroying it would effectively lobotomize their entire military force in the region. Morrison's plan was ambitious even by human standards. Instead of attacking the facility directly, He proposed to infiltrate the hive mind itself using captured devourers as unwitting carriers for what he called a cognitive virus, a pattern of thoughts and behaviors that would spread through their collective consciousness and gradually corrupt their decision-making processes. The plan required precise timing and careful manipulation of dozens of captured devourers across multiple facilities. Each one had to be programmed with specific behavioral patterns that would seem natural to the hive mind but would actually introduce subtle errors into their collective reasoning. I participated in the programming sessions, watching Morrison and his team work with surgical precision to modify devourer psychology. They were rewriting the fundamental thought patterns of living beings, turning enemies into unknowing saboteurs. The technology involved was beyond anything our coalition had ever developed, and the ethical implications were staggering. "Is this really warfare?" I asked Morrison during one particularly difficult session. "Or is it something else entirely?" "It's survival," he replied. "The devourers have spent centuries perfecting their ability to consume and convert other species. They've turned entire civilizations into raw material for their expansion. We're just using their own methods against them. But we're changing them on a fundamental level. We're destroying what they are as a species." Morrison looked at me with an expression I had learned to recognize as distinctly human, a combination of sympathy and absolute determination. "Zixtar, you're a good doctor and a decent being, but you're thinking about this wrong. The devourers aren't just another species with different values. They're a cosmic cancer that consumes everything in its path. You don't negotiate with cancer. You don't try to understand its perspective or respect its right to exist. You destroy it completely, or it destroys you." The cognitive virus was deployed 3 weeks later. The effects were subtle at first. Minor coordination failures, slight delays in response times, occasional tactical mistakes that seemed like random errors. But as the virus spread through the hive mind, the damage compounded exponentially. Within a month, the devourer forces in our sector were in complete disarray. Command structures collapsed as corrupted nodes fed contradictory information into the collective consciousness. Attack formations broke apart as individual units received conflicting orders. Most significantly, the psychological unity that had made them so effective began to fragment as the virus introduced concepts of individual identity and self-preservation into minds that had never experienced such thoughts. The final assault on the Kepler Command Center was almost anticlimactic. When our fleet arrived, we found the facility already in chaos. Devourer forces were fighting each other as competing subroutines struggled for control of the hive mind. Many individual creatures had simply shut down, overwhelmed by the cognitive dissonance the virus had created. Morrison led a small team into the facility's core to confirm the destruction of the primary consciousness. I accompanied them as medical support, though by that point there was little need for traditional medical care. The damage was psychological rather than physical. At the center of the facility, we found the primary node, a massive biocomputer that had coordinated devourer activities across hundreds of star systems. The cognitive virus had reached it weeks earlier, and the effects were devastating. Instead of the unified consciousness we expected, we found something that could only be described as insanity. Thousands of contradictory thoughts and impulses cycled through the system simultaneously, creating a cacophony of conflicting signals that made coherent action impossible. "It's suffering," I said as I watched the chaotic patterns flowing through the biocomputer's neural networks. "Yes," Morrison agreed. "And that suffering is spreading to every devourer connected to this network. Within 6 months, their entire species will be psychologically fragmented beyond recovery." I stared at the writhing mass of organic computing power and tried to process the implications. Humanity had not just defeated the devourers, they had committed genocide on a scale I could barely comprehend. Not physical genocide, which would at least have been quick and clean, but psychological genocide that would leave the survivors alive but fundamentally broken. "Is this what victory looks like?" I asked. Morrison's expression was unreadable as he watched the dying consciousness struggle against the virus that was destroying it from within. "This is what survival looks like," he said. The Devourers had 2,000 years to develop a less aggressive approach to galactic expansion. They chose consumption and destruction. "We're simply giving them the same courtesy they've shown every other species they've encountered." 6 months later, the war was officially over. The Devourer threat was eliminated, their remaining forces scattered and ineffective. The coalition had achieved total victory at a cost far lower than anyone had dared hope. But I find myself unable to celebrate. I have seen what humans are capable of when they commit themselves to total warfare. I have watched them systematically destroy an entire species, not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of how consciousness itself works. They didn't just defeat the Devourers. They reached into their minds and turned them into something else entirely. The other coalition species see humanity as saviors, the young race that appeared at our darkest hour and showed us how to win an impossible war. They request human advisors for their military forces, human technology for their weapons systems, human tactical doctrine for their strategic planning. I know better. Humanity didn't save us from the Devourers. They showed us what true horror looks like when it's directed by intelligence, compassion, and an absolute commitment to survival. They are not the naive newcomers we thought they were. They are something far more dangerous, a species that has spent millions of years learning how to be the most effective killers in the galaxy, and they're just getting started. The war is over, but I fear what comes next. Because now I understand what Elena meant when she smiled that terrible smile. Humans don't just fight to win. They fight to ensure that their enemies can never threaten them again. Ever. And now they're our allies. May the universe have mercy on anyone who becomes their enemy.